Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Cape Ann Today. We are joined by Rob Liebow. He is the superintendent of Rockport Public Schools. How you doing, Rob?
Not too bad. All going good.
Yeah, hanging in there?
Have to, right? You deal with the card. I think we said this before. You get cards, you pick them up, you deal with the cards that are on the table, and you play them. So the best of your ability, and hope you come out of it with a winning hand at some point. All right.
Yeah. So can you give us sort of like gauge the temperature for us on how students and staff are feeling in another year of getting education through the pandemic?
I mean, I think we're sort of in a better place than we were last year, but it's sort of like Home Alone with a cab scene where the driver looks back over his shoulder and says, "Ain't any better in here, kid." And, I mean, it's better. I mean, there's no doubt it's better, but kids are still having to wear masks. They're, doing that in their extracurricular activities, and it's just not the way they should experience school. And for the adults, it's not the way you sort of signed on to do school. So a lot more expectations for everybody, pretty high stakes, but when you're in this business, that's what it's all about, is to try to position the kids for the best opportunities they can have, because at some point we're going to be through this, and I think we're maybe starting to see some glimmers of coming out of it. And I think we're closer to normal certainly than we were last year in January, when I believe we were just fully remote at the time. So our kids are back in school. They're doing their activities. They're cooperating with all the mitigation stuff they have to do, and it's just part of their world, I guess, but not really the way it should be for them.
So tell us about the testing situation in Rockport schools.
Yeah, I mean, our testing program, I'm really proud of. We test 100% of our staff. It's a condition of employment. And also vaccination is a condition of their employment, unless they have a religious deferment, basically, or a medical condition that prevents them from having the vaccination. And that's been the way since the very beginning. Our union signed on to that. Our kids, we are testing 98% of the kids. We do it on Tuesday and Wednesday. So today is a test day. And by the end of tomorrow, we will have tested 750 adults and kids in a very small school district. And then we'll have the results for those and be able to identify any positives and, move forward and try to keep the school as safe as it can be. But we've had great participation in that. It's required for extracurricular. So if you're on a basketball team, you have to be in the pool testing program. But the regular student doesn't necessarily have to do that. But I think they bought into it early. We had good participation early. And I think it's just a sign of the community reflecting the desire to keep schools open. We were in sort of a different position than some schools who, kept open through the pandemic, and we closed. So this was something that was a ticket to keep us open, and the way to keep us open, and to show us the pure data that it was safe to stay open. And I'm totally convinced it's the right thing to do. Our kids are very good about it. We do a double swabbing process. So they do 2 swabs of their nose, one for a big pool of what was 10s, now down to smaller pools, and then your own individual tube. So if your big tube tests positive, then the lab pulls your single tube and identifies who you are and, whether you need to be out. And that's a PCR test. So, that's about as good as we possibly can be. The state has just added, and this would be for all schools that opt in, a at-home antigen test program that was just unveiled last week. And we have 350 adults and kids already opting into that, which gives them a take-home kit with 2 tests in it, one for later this week and one for next week. And then they get resupplied. So that gives you pool testing on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then your own at-home antigen test for Friday or Saturday. And if you test positive, then you sign that you're obligated to turn yourself in for having had a positive or whatever. And that is about as good a testing program as you possibly could have. When this all started, there was no tests at all. So that's really given us a good sense of security, and everybody's pretty relaxed around school. I mean, it's there was very little, if any, transmission within the schools. And I didn't buy that party line way back in the beginning. I figured schools with poor ventilation, old buildings, kids packed into hallways, no way. But they've gone long enough with what's called test and stay, which if your pool was positive, then they look at, all right, who are you close contacts with and could have spread the virus with in your class or cafeteria or auditorium. And then if they identified you as a close contact, you'd get binaxed. And if you were negative, you could keep coming back for 7 days that then got reduced to 5 days. And I was told the other day, as part of signing on to this take-home test, that in the high school and middle school, since we had done test and stay, there was nobody picked up as being another positive in school who was considered to be a close contact. And the elementary school, where the kids aren't vaccinated, or very few are, it was less than, it was 0.6% of the kids in the test and stay program were ever picked up in the follow-up. So that's really reassuring that schools are a safe place to be. And, in their own lives, they're out doing whatever they're going to do, and they're in places where they're maybe not wearing their masks. I've been converted in that, that situation from a paranoid, negative person that said, no way. But now I have totally bought into schools, if mitigated properly, are very, very safe places for our kids to be, and it's where they belong.
It's an interesting point, Rob, because you in the public health officials that we've spoken to over the last couple of years, they said that it turns out to be the cleanest places with the fewest transmissions are the schools and restaurants.
Yep.
Amazing.
And we put in compliments of our town administrator and money from the federal government. We put in $190,000 bipolar ionization system into our ventilation system last year that takes out little tiny particles that normally would cause flus and COVID and that kind of stuff, and removes them from the air. So you don't even know it's there. But that wouldn't have happened in a regular year, that we could have come up with $200,000 in the middle of a year to do that. I believe Gloucester did the same thing through their DPW. And, our buildings are old. So the ventilation systems, when we first started this, you tested the air exchange. Well, that unit doesn't work. No wonder it's hot and stuffy in here. It hasn't worked for 10 years. And those were all fixed and new belts. And then we added that system. And I think the schools are a really safe place for adults and kids to be now, where in the beginning, it was like, no, you're setting me up for a really bad situation. So that's a bright light, right, in the world of what we look at. So I'm really happy about that aspect.
How about particularly with Omicron, absences, staff absences, student absenteeism? That's been something that's chronic for a while. At least they talk about that a lot in Gloucester.
We've had a number of staff and student absences, but we haven't been in a situation where we couldn't cover it. And we don't have a massive sub list. We haven't had to put people in auditoriums and say, all right, there's 4 classes in here with 1 person watching you. We haven't had to do that. So we had a little burst coming out of Christmas vacation, which we expected. And now it's come back to last week, there wasn't a high school teacher out of the building. And kid-wise, there are kids that get identified as positive through our system that have to be out. But now it's reduced down to just a 5-day period of time. And then you can come back without a test as long as you are symptom-free and have gone that 5-day period of time, where it used to be, 10 days and, get a negative test to come back. They have really focused on keeping kids in school, and we have not had a lot of absences. I look at our athletic teams, they're not, the second string isn't playing all the time because the first string's, sick. Occasional situations, but not where we've been overwhelmed with it and not been able to handle it.
Yeah. And I was going to ask if either sports or after school activities have been affected like they were last year.
Uh, I mean, we're back except for the wearing of masks. The kids are playing a full schedule. They're going to other people's games. They're practicing. Our kids had their concerts at the Shaylin Lou, even though Shaylin Lou has its own sort of COVID rules. When we use it, we're using it as an extension of our school property, becomes a school event. And we simply use our own situation, wear masks, try to, stay in your own family group or, separated every other seat. And that's been perfect. Have those kids back in the Shaylin Lou for, the Christmas concert and jazz concerts was, the way it should be. Masks on, it's hard to, do your choral piece as well as it can be. I think some of the, kids we've had who have been singers, that's pretty hard to do through your mask, but they somehow pull it off. You really can't tell because you can't sort of remember what it used to be like. But it's got to be hard for them to go through that and worry about college and everything else that's going on. But we're certainly a lot better off than we were. You turn the clock back at all. So.
Okay, last question. Bus drivers. That's been a problem all across the state. And you got your license just so you could drive a bus, right?
Yeah, I got it. Neil Deneen, who was a former social studies teacher, got it. Our drivers have been here. We have 3 regular drivers. There's been occasional illness. We can do our runs with 2 buses if we have to. It's sort of a clever consolidation trick that goes on. And we've never had to, pull the superintendent onto a regular run. Neil Deneen, who's retired, has done sort of a fill-in to keep the 3rd bus on the road. I'll pick up an extracurricular run if there's nobody to cover it, but we haven't, got the situation where at one point we were 0 for 3. We had no drivers for various medical and personal family kind of situations, and that's what sort of led me to go after my license, even though it was on my bucket list at one point. So,
what's it like driving a bus?
It's actually kind of fun. It's like driving a big boat, which I do in the summer. It's the same kind of thing, I mean, I don't know. There was a guy that was my high school principal when I taught school in Bucksport, Maine. The gym is named after him, like this gym is named after Steve Rowell, a very famous legend here in Rockport. It was the Ralph P. Jewett Gymnasium. And when he got done, he drove the regular school buses in Bucksport, and I respected him so much as a principal. He would evaluate you. He'd come down the hallway. I'd look at my door. He'd have a broom. He's sweeping the hallway. He'd stop, lean in the doorway, watch your class for about a half an hour, and then he'd keep sweeping. At the end of the day, your evaluation was in the mailbox, spot on. He picked up who was listening, whether you reached male and female audiences equally. And I respected his work ethic. And then when he drove a bus, I said, I'm going to do that someday. And he died, last year, 91 years old. But I never forgot how he didn't ask anybody to do anything that he couldn't do. And he wanted to be around kids when he got done. And that's how he did it. He drove the school bus. So it'll be a way for me to still be around kids in a positive way. So that's sort of keeps you young, keeps you alive. So that's really why I did it, I guess.
That's great.
So are you staying in Rockport?
Oh yeah, we'll stay in Rockport.
Oh,
I'll go to Maine in the summer and, do my boating stuff. But yeah, I mean, we came to Rockport. Rockport's home. We bought a house here. The grandkids are in Hamilton, Wenham. So as long as they're here, there's certainly a reason to be here when they're only half an hour away. And if they moved, that might change the equation. But right now they go to school at Hamilton, Wenham. One goes to Shore Country Day. She absolutely loves it. And they're doing great. We go to their games every Sunday. So you pop in a car and you go to Hamilton Wenham Gym or to Danvers or whatever. You see your, 6 and 7 and 8-year-old grandkids play. You can't do that if you live in Maine or if you gone out of state. So that's the beauty of staying here, let alone Rockport, right? Is a place that I've, grown to love over 10 years. So it's been good to me.
Yeah. So Rob, any winter events or big ticket items facing the schools that we should know about?
Well, we're in budget season, so the budgets are coming together. Regular town meeting, we hope. We don't have to worry about an override right now because that passed last spring at town meeting and was passed in the vote after that. So financially, we have our legs under us for another number of years. So that takes some of that pressure off. We're hoping that Amy Rose's, Give Back Festival in Rockport, where the kids go down there and there's all kinds of events going on, is able to come back again this year after a 2-year layoff, because that's really positive, where the kids get out in the community and, basically thank people for supporting them in a very small school system that still manages to survive and operate, is really important for the old folks to see it and for the young folks to see it, because otherwise you may never come into a school. You just drive by and you wonder what's going on in there. Well, if you get out into the community, there it is. And they're down at Dock Square and the band's playing. The whole group gets in that little, whatever they call the little courtyard thing where Dock Square is. Probably Dock Square.
Dock Square, yeah.
Stand there and watch that while they're
Yeah.
in front of the Blue Lobster Grill or whatever. And people just come by, they're clapping, they're putting money in a hat to give to the music program. And it's just a wonderful community event that, a lot of small towns have, a lot of big towns can have it, but it's sort of uniquely Rockport and something that Amy Rose did. I was just very proud that she, went out and did that. Hometown girl, went to school here, was a guidance secretary, guidance director, assistant principal, high school principal, and then she gives back to her community. Her own kids go here. That's pretty special.
So I said I had a last question, but I still have another question. You mentioned that the schools are in pretty good shape financially. Could you just touch on money that you received from ARPA? Like, what you mentioned, a lot of it went to the bipolarization system, but anything else you did with federal money?
The town money side went to the bipolar one, so we didn't have to dip into our school allocation for that. We received about total up from ESSER 1, 2, and 3 around $1.5 million in funding across, you hope it lasts 2 to 3 years. And what we used it for was called Recovery and Acceleration Services, which is to take those kids that, missed out, got behind, bring them back on track, as well as offer some of the extensions that kids would have normally had. We hired 6 recovery specialists. We got a couple extra counselors that are here for the length of that grant, that help our kids sort of, get their feet back under them again. And that was a godsend for us, but it's not part of our regular budget. We didn't use it to fund people in the budget. The budget is its own swirling mass of its own. And then you have this extra money to do above and beyond. And it was designed not to replace, it was designed to extend and get kids caught back up. And everybody around the state received various versions of that through their Title I formula. So that's been a wonderful thing. If we hadn't had that, we'd have been in real trouble, and our kids would have been in real trouble. So
great points, Rob. Let's check in before the end of the school year to see what's going on with graduation, et cetera, et cetera. It's always good catching up with you, though.
It's my pleasure, and I thought I did something wrong. You guys weren't coming back. So.
We want to go to the retirement party.
Oh, I don't know if they'll even have one, but
I want to go for a bus ride.
I know.
That'd be pretty fun. We should do the next show from there.
That would be fun.
Come out, and I'll pick you up. So not a problem.
All right.
Right.
358 Granite Street.
Great talking to you guys.
Bye. Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.